is Terry Bradshaw, quarterback, Pittsburgh Steelers.
It's 7:15. There's a new home run champion of all time, and it's Henry Aaron.
This is baseball, Major League Baseball. And this is
ABC's Monday Night Baseball, live from Fenway Park in Boston, Massachusetts.
Looking. He's under the gun. He's fired. He throws. It is.
Here we go. The Past Our Prime podcast is up and running, and thank you for listening to the last show of February. Didn't we just have Preston Pearson on? Super Bowl is over. Seattle wins their second championship. Bill Mahoney and Mark Hoffman here again. And Bill, February 2nd, 2014, the Seahawks beat the Broncos and Peyton Manning in a blowout 43-8. What do you remember about that one?
Well, I produced in Seattle. I remember everything about that. Percy Harvin's touchdown run at the start of the second half was just an explosion in the room. And the Peyton Manning, the first play of the game, they throw it over his head, they get a safety.
Yeah.
They were so dominant that year. You have the old NFL films I had to go through, and they give you those beautiful low angle shots. You did not realize how hard these guys hit until you actually got to see that low angle. I remember one specific, not from the Broncos game, but one from the Packers game, where Cam Chancellor, they throw a ball to what was his, it was one of the better receivers for the Green Bay at the time. His name starts with a J. But they throw him the ball, and he doesn't catch it because Cam Chancellor is going to kill him. And he curls up, and you don't realize that this Seattle team back in that day was absolutely phenomenal on both sides of the ball.
The Legion of Boom.
Yes, they were unstoppable and very egotistical. Great interviews. I loved every part of that team. Loved every part. And then they get Percy Harvin, and he takes that ball at the second half and runs it back. It's just unbelievable. Yeah, great memories of that.
I remember two things about that game. One, it was played in New York or New Jersey, actually, but still. Yep. And the first play of the game, like you mentioned, Peyton and shotgun, snap goes into the end zone. 7 seconds into the game, it's 2-0 Seattle. Game over.
Game over. And it was Jordy Nelson. Jordy Nelson, that's the name I'm looking for.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, and the thing is, going in, there was not a doubt in Seattle at that time. They said, well, we're Super Bowl champions. This will be our number one. They thought they'd get 2 or 3 more. But, oh, God, yeah, I remember that whole scene.
Mark, for the most part, the Super Bowl has been very competitive the last 20, 25 years, for the most part. But there was a time when it was blowout after blowout.
After blowout, absolutely, especially in the beginning. There weren't, any competitive games. I think the first competitive game was 5, where the Colts beat the Cowboys 16-13, and I couldn't go to sleep that night because the Cowboys should have won that game.
Yeah, I mean, you remember those, like when the Niners played the Chargers and the Niners I think they beat Denver one time 55-10.
Yeah.
I think the first there were some close ones, but the first great Super Bowl is the Steelers Cowboys 35-31 Super Bowl.
Yes.
I think that's probably the first one.
If Jackie Smith had held onto the ball.
Exactly. That's what they remember. Most people don't remember anything about the game. They remember Roger Staubach finding a wide open Jackie Smith, and it bounces off his chest. And that Staubach reaction, like, oh, come on. Yeah.
On the cover of this week's issue, Bobby Clark, the captain of the Flyers, our third guest from that fantastic team of the 70s. Well, we were hoping. Mark, we had Bernie Perron on back in May of 2024, and we lost him, but sometimes you just have an instant connection with these guys, and Bernie was one of those.
He sure was. And was Bernie the one who invited us to come out and
yes,
go on his boat? And I wish we had taken him up on that now.
Yeah. And then
I just have one question: who was Bobby Clark's dentist? Because man, there are no teeth in the front there.
No. In November, Billy, with the biggest, baddest bully of the Broad Street Bullies, Dave the Hammer Schultz joined us.
Oh boy. And he walked just funny the way he talked about beating guys up. Yeah, I just punched him in the head a bunch of times and the coaches didn't like that. I just love the fact he was just so, and to be honest with you, on our what is it, Instagram and TikTok, that's the number one video. 130,000 people have watched that.
Oh wow.
About
Yeah.
our interview with him.
I mean,
I mean,
people still know who the Hammer
they
is.
do.
Right?
They do. And the thing is, we always get the guys that are they're the great players or the guys that are, have done so many things. Dave Schultz, he was a above average player, but he beat people up. And people seem to like to talk to people that beat people up.
Yeah.
And he did.
He did. Made a living out of it. So we don't have Bobby Clark coming on this time. Not able to get the captain of the Flyers, but we did get John Papanek, and many of you may not know him because John is one of those guys who was behind the scenes for most of his career, but his career is an incredible one. Started at SI. He wrote an article that we'll talk about in this issue. Went on to become the managing editor for SI, started SI for Kids, then went over to ESPN. He did it all. True visionary, John Papanek. So we'll talk to him in just a bit. But before we get to the scorecard, Billy, letter from the publisher. And heck, we know this person.
We do it, Sheila Young. But I think Mark's got a lot of good stuff on this gal. Mark and I were talking about this. He likes this letter from the publisher gal.
Well, I like it because this is a case where a guest that we had on the show, Sheila Young, and a reporter from SI is the one that comes to her rescue. You see, because apparently her outfit wasn't fitting properly and she was really afraid that it would cut, her time down. She'd lose seconds that are crucial. And one of the SI people actually came to her rescue and helped fix the suit for her. It was too loose and she did some stuff and
Can I say one thing about this?
Yeah.
The other thing that gets me about this is I wish we would have known this prior
Yes.
to interviewing Sheila Young.
Yes. Yes.
I mean, that's the thing. I look at this and I go, oh, what a fun question. I mean, she obviously ended up winning 3 medals wearing the outfit that Anita Vershoth, or the SI reporter,
I'm glad you said that.
pitched.
Yeah, I know. Well, the funny thing is, especially in preview magazines, but just in general, I mean, we read about these people and that's the first time we hear from them. It's often not the last time. And so
No, she's in every issue now.
we get, we're researching people that we already spoke with. Yeah, we'll have to go back and edit that and have her on again. So,
Yeah.
All right, scorecard, Billy, George Plimpton, here he is again.
You got it. He wants to break a record. He wants to break the fireworks world record. So he has a 720-pound Roman candle called the Fat Man. It's supposed to hit 1,000 feet high. Instead, it fizzled, exploded, and kicked out a 10-foot deep crater. Plimpton said, at least he was honest, it's an absolute failure.
well, Plimpton was a failure. Like when he played a Detroit Lions quarterback.
That's
He went
right.
to it was an utter disaster in the book Paper Lion, which they made into a movie with Alan Alda. So he's used to not having success at stuff.
That's right.
Mark, we talk a lot about UCLA men's hoops, but today we're going to talk a little bit about UCLA women's hoops.
Well, the UCLA women won one of the first titles with Ann Myers. So they had, and this was before it was like NCAA, it was called something else. But this is back in '76, okay? So UCLA is playing Cal Poly San Luis Obispo. And I guess the Bruins are a much better team. So much so that the sports information director at Cal Poly, a guy by the name of Wayne Shaw, said that he looked at the records of the two teams and predicted that UCLA would win the game by 62 points. Well, the local paper said, this is outrageous, 62 points. And fans were calling him a male chauvinist of the worst kind. Well, they ended up playing the game. And you know what the final score was? UCLA 97, Cal Poly 35, 62-point difference. So, and then the following week, Cal Poly is going to go to LA for a rematch, and Shaw predicted that this time they'll lose by 77 points.
And I'll
Did they?
That's a really good question.
Yeah,
I thought I was waiting for that. Sorry about that.
I've looked briefly and couldn't find the answer, but I'll bet you it wasn't much closer than 60 points.
No.
Cal Poly San Luis Obispo women's team, they didn't travel well back then.
No.
It started as a nothing moment, Bobby Knight yanking Jim Wiseman to the bench after a bad stretch in an overtime win over Michigan. But one photo caught it. Suddenly, the Great Jersey Poll was everywhere, splashed across front pages nationwide. Knight exploded, blasting the paper for ignoring Kent Benson's clutch tip-in. Fans flooded the phones, and the whole thing snowballed. In the end, Wiseman shrugged it off. Knight cooled down and even admitted, if you take the praise, you've got to take the criticism too. So this was the early, years of Bobby Knight at Indiana, and we were all getting a good taste of what was about to come. He was kind of like the Woody Hayes of college basketball. I saw a clip of him the other day where some guy, it looks like it's a coach's show or whatever, and he's talking, and he's just talking like this. And he's saying, well, we got to get better at blah, blah, blah. And then he pauses and he goes, and, we're just not progressing. And then he just rips his microphone off and says, and I'm done with this effing show. And he storms off. And I mean, he goes from like laughing to just psychotic in like a matter of 15 seconds. It is hilarious now. Back then, I just think of like being the producer being like, I thought he was going to kill me.
I have a word for you. It's actually a hyphen. Bipolar.
Yeah, right.
It's time for they said it.
Lord Killian, who's the president of the International Olympic Committee, he voices approval of a new IOC rule that members must retire at the age of 72. I don't want the Olympics to be run by a bunch of old people. Lord Killian, by the way, was 61 at the time. Okay, that's great. But, we have Supreme Court judges and presidents that are in their 80s. So I don't know. Frankly, IOC people are stodgy anyway. Didn't matter how old you are.
I mean, I'm telling you, this Lord Killian guy's 61. I would have thought he was 100.
Well, yes. And I think he was one of the villains in Lord of the Rings, if I'm not mistaken.
Now, was that his name, Lord, or was that something that was bestowed on him?
I assume it's a title from.
Okay, I was gonna say, you name your kid Lord. There's a lot of pressure on that one.
Yeah,
that's right.
Yeah. Opening up those Golden Gates, the 1976 Winter Olympics in Innsbruck were widely praised for flawless organization, spirit, and atmosphere, with success measured less by medal counts than by moments of inspiration and human drama. So, Mark, tell me about the medal count.
Well, you know who finished first? It was not the United States, Russia, 27 medals.
USSR.
And you know who's second? Not the United States, another communist country, East Germany with 19. And remember, back then, people today don't realize there was a West Germany and East Germany until, they broke that wall down. It was built, they divided Germany up into East and West for decades. And West was the democratic, country, and East was the communist country. And Berlin was split down the middle, even though Berlin was located firmly in East Germany geographically. But yeah, I mean, and again, you have to remember, the communist countries, a lot of their amateurs were really professionals. So back then, we had amateurs competing. So it wasn't a level playing field.
No. And the funny thing, and not to get political, but when people talk about building a wall on our border, it's supposedly to try to keep people out. The wall in Germany was kept to keep people in.
Yeah.
That's right. You're not going anywhere.
You're not going. Don't try to hop over that fence.
That's right.
Will not end well for you. Bill, lots of every time the games, they present certain people that just kind of come from out of nowhere and become stars. And this one skater, this gal, she became a household name, and 50 years later, we all still know.
Yep.
Who Dorothy Hamill is.
We do. Everyone knows the little pixie haircut and how fun she was in the Olympics. Well, she won a gold medal. And usually you keep your gold medal maybe in a drawer, give it to a family member, do something with it. No, she kept it in her blouse.
Wow.
Yeah, an interesting.
I keep it close to me too.
Yeah. I'd go looking for them.
Yeah, Scott, I was going to say that, but I'd offend Mark and say,
want to show me your medals? Yeah.
Why is this so hard? Excuse me.
The games highlighted unlikely triumphs and small nation pride, including Liechtenstein's remarkable two-medal haul. Didn't you say, Billy, they have like a population of 22,000 people.
23,000.
23,000.
Two medals.
And they're winning gold medals, so that's pretty great. And the Winter Games weren't quite what they are now. Now it's a production, I mean, NBC's airing 8, 9, 10 hours a day on multiple platforms and stuff. Back then, that wasn't the case, but we still got to know your Dorothy Hamels and your Franz Klammers, and they forever became legends. That's for sure.
Yeah, all they do mini stories. So the thing is the guy that like Rosie Mittermeier, that was an interesting one as well. They'd have stories on all these people now. We would know them.
Yep. An odds-on favorite in Vegas. Mark, tell me about this Nevada Southern University team.
That's right, because Nevada Southern University became the school we all love, UNLV. And when they become UNLV, and within 7 years after becoming UNLV, they're like in the NCAA tournament. They're competing, for Final Four berths. They went to the Final Four in 1977, which was just 7 years after they became UNLV. And they only lost by 1 point to North Carolina, where they would have been in the championship game. And this team in 1976 went to the Sweet 16. They lost to Arizona 114 to 109. Sounds like an NBA game.
Yeah.
And then in 1990, they finally won it, which is really weird because I always thought UNLV won, like countless, NCAA championships, but they only won one in 1990. They got upset one year too in the finals when everyone thought, they were going to run away with it. And they made the Final Four times, but they only won it once, which I found very interesting.
Yeah, UNLV shattered stereotypes and conspiracy-laced rumors by quietly building a dominant 24-1 record. Coach Jerry Tarkanian endlessly investigated, widely mistrusted, forged a disciplined, high-tempo team, scored 108.8 points per game while playing tough, intelligent defense. Bill, Tark the Shark had an amazing run at UNLV.
He did. The Rebels never made the tournament before Tarkanian. When he got there, made the tournament 12 of his 18 years. And then if you just go a little forward, when he left UNLV, he went to Fresno State. Fresno State averaged 12 wins the prior 6 years. After he came there, the next 7 years, they averaged 21 wins. Jerry Tarkanian was an amazingly great coach. Yes, there's a lot of controversy, but just a great coach. Because if you look at UNLV now, they've missed the tournament 13 straight years.
Yeah, and you can say the same about his time at Long Beach. They were
exactly. Yeah, I forgot about that. That's right. They were a great team.
Great team. Yep. Not since he left, basically.
Nope.
Let's talk a little NBA hoops. Slick's his name and his game. Slick Watts became the most beloved athlete in Washington State, not through superstardom, but through joy, accessibility, and an infectious love of the game and people of basketball. Undrafted and overlooked, he would carve out an NBA career with relentless energy, creativity, and optimism, leading the league in steals and assists while redefining what leadership looked like in Seattle. Bill, he was quite a character and became quite a good ball player.
Yeah, he did. I mean, you only look at his averages, 9, 6, and 2, that's steals. The man built his game up. But what I loved about him, yeah, he looked a little bit different. You love the little headband, whether it was yellow or green. But he was just an amazingly great man. They said he never turned down a kid to autograph except right before the game. He would also sign hundreds of index cards as he was walking in and give them to people. And there was a quote on it that always said, "Giving pleasure is the greatest thing a person can do." He just came a great guy that actually built a career that would he go to? Went to a community college, and he went to Xavier University of Louisiana. And to be able to come out there and make it in the NBA is a true success story. Just a great, not great player, just a great ambassador for the NBA.
And I think he's the first player to ever lead the NBA in assists and steals in the same season.
Yeah. And they said he shaved his head because he had a childhood injury, not because he was trying to set a new trend that Michael Jordan took over.
Mm. Yeah, I believe undrafted.
Yeah, very much.
I think someone said to Bill Russell, who was the coach then, hey, you should look at this kid. And he goes on. He won the Defensive Player of the Year one year, and became a real good player. But not just a real good player, like you said, a real good Seattle SuperSonic. He
Yeah.
just fell in love with the city, and the city fell in love with him. He said, "I am a part of this community, and it is a beautiful place. God picked it out just for me. If they ever trade me, I'll retire." And that was kind of true, because
Yeah.
he was traded to New Orleans in the middle of the 77-78 season. The next year he played in Houston, and that was it. He retired,
Yeah.
only played about 5-6 years in the NBA.
And then he came back to Seattle.
He almost wasn't a Sonic, though.
Yeah. Well, was he?
No, because in the ABA supplemental draft, the Memphis Tams tagged him.
That's
He
right.
ended up deciding to go, and play for the Sonics, which was a smart move on his part, because we all remember the powerhouse the Memphis Tams were.
The writer of this story is a gentleman by the name of John Papanek. His days at SI were just getting started. He would eventually become the magazine's youngest ever staff writer, senior editor, and at age 38, its youngest ever chief editor. He would later start the groundbreaking Sports Illustrated for Kids that helped young kids learn and love to read. What a great thing that was. And when his days at SI were over, he went to this place called ESPN, starting ESPN the magazine, eventually playing a vital role in making ESPN.com what it is today. Basically, he was a pioneer. He was at the forefront of just about everything he touched. And John joins us now to talk about an amazing career in sports journalism. Hey, John, thanks for joining us today on the Past Our Prime podcast.
Well, Scott, thank you for inviting me, and thank you for remembering, and thank you for using your tool to go and dig deep into the time machine that is Google, and finding out all that information about me. I forgot most of that stuff myself.
Some of it I might have made up.
No. AI, it's a wonderful thing.
We don't let the truth stop us here.
In that February 9th, 1976 Sports Illustrated piece on Slick Watts, who was having a breakout year in Seattle, but was hardly a household name, what was your general approach to profiling athletes who weren't necessarily superstars, but had a compelling presence?
Well, that is really what made Sports Illustrated so unique and so powerful and so successful. Because in this case, yeah, the country hadn't heard or seen somebody named Slick Watts, but he was a household name in Seattle. He had emerged and captivated that, happening city, which still had a pretty young expansion franchise that hadn't really achieved very much. I think they'd been around maybe 10 years, maybe not even that much. So, part of my job as a young reporter on a beat like the NBA was to discover unheralded and sort of unknown people. Remember, this was long before ESPN, long before cable TV, long before sports highlights from around the country were a regular part of the 6 o'clock and the 11 o'clock news. So, if you didn't live in the city where it was happening, you didn't know very much. Even if you lived in New York City, you might have known a little bit about what's going on in Boston or Chicago, but you didn't know what was happening in Dallas or Denver or Seattle or places like that. So I was out on the road, as a young reporter. I wasn't even an official writer. My job was basically to follow the big guys around, like Curry Kirkpatrick, who was a senior writer, and Pat Putnam, who was a senior writer, and I would sort of, talk to people, do interviews, write notes, and give them to the writers. And at this stage of my career, occasionally I could go to the editor in charge of the sport and say, hey, there's a really interesting player. I had done this earlier. I discovered another interesting point guard playing for the Buffalo Braves that nobody ever heard of, and probably very few people remember today. But his name was Randy Smith. He was a 6th round draft choice. He had been a Division III All-American at the University of Buffalo, but a track All-American. He was a superstar sprinter and high jumper, and a 6th-round draft choice, and he became a star on the Buffalo Braves. So I said, hey, there'd be a story about this guy. So they said, okay, write it, and I wrote that. So I think it was maybe a few months later in the same season, 75, 76 NBA season, that I discovered this character named Slick Watts, 5'8" funny looking, bald-headed black guy who looked like he had arrived on a spaceship from Mars. He wore a green or yellow headband around his head like a ring of Saturn. And he was funny and he was clever and he played his ass off. And they started to win in ways that they'd never won before. His coach was the greatest winner in the history of sports, a guy named Bill Russell, who everybody knows as a player had played in 13 NBA seasons and won 11 NBA championships. And as a college player, playing 2 years of varsity basketball at the University of San Francisco, led a team that won 55 straight games and won 2 consecutive NCAA titles. So Russell was a basketball player, who in 15 seasons, college and pro, won 13 championships at his level. So all of a sudden, here was this little guy he had never heard of. Somebody said, oh, take a look at this guy. And he was as popular at this point, if not perhaps more popular in Seattle than Bill Russell was. But this character, Slick Watts, suddenly became the topic of every conversation. And he was on billboards, and, you know, they would have pictures of Mount Rainier on a billboard with a yellow headband wrapped around the mountain peak. And it was such a phenomenon. I went and told my editors, and they said, okay, well, go write about him. So there I did. I wrote it, and it became a very well-placed and well-read feature in SI, and it certainly helped me propel a little bit my reputation, but it helped Slick a great deal. And, you know, he became highly paid. You know, I think in my story, the big news hook was that he joined the $100,000 salary club, which in 1976 was still a pretty big number. You know, there were lots of guys making $30,000, $40,000 in sports. And if you made 100,000, you had arrived to the top echelon. So that was the hook. And, you know, it was a really fun story. And interestingly, that his arrival there really sort of propelled Seattle to a great run, because the following season, they made it to the NBA Finals, lost to the Washington Bullets. And the year after that, they went back to the final and beat the Bullets for their, was it the only championship in franchise history? Yeah, that was it. His star burned brightly for a couple of seasons. And then, you know, he had a really lovely sort of post-playing career. He did some broadcasting. He did teaching and coaching. He was a great member of the community and always beloved in Seattle. And I'm sure there are people there who still remember Slick Watts.
Yeah, I'm one of those guys. I remember those.
Okay.
They were tape delayed back in the day.
Oh,
I remember watching them. Yeah, but you talk about with not only Slick Watts and Randy Smith, you also wrote a little bit about Norm Van Leer in your point guard trilogy. What drew you to those under the radar guards?
Well, you know, I was just enthralled, you know, meeting these young NBA players. And, you know, it was still sort of it was the end of an era when, you know, it was still kind of considered to be novel that black athletes were becoming really important in their sports, and there were plenty of leftover kind of I won't call them racists, but it was, and it was also assumed by a lot of people that basketball players weren't very smart. Um, Maybe because of stereotypical thinking on the part of many people, which was if you were not a white person, you're not going to be very smart. So uh, these guys were unbelievably smart. They were as smart as any people that I knew in my life, and I found it just fascinating to get to know them. Not just the unheralded guys, but the Walt Frazier's and the Earl Monroes and the Oscar Robertsons. I mean, these guys were really, really interesting and smart. And of course, point guards, you know, are seeing things that haven't happened yet. And they have the ball in their hand, and their job is to get the ball to the next place to a person that doesn't yet know that he's going to get the ball. So they had a sort of a sixth sense and a second vision. I mean, later on I wrote about Larry Bird, who personified that better than anybody. Not a point guard, but an incredible passer. But point guards like quarterbacks, I found to be fascinating, and I had an advantage that I really wasn't aware of going in, but it was that I was the same age as these players were. I was 23, 24. I was 2 or 3, 4 years out of college, and so were they. And in most major league cities, maybe all major league cities, the reporters, the people that covered the team for the local newspapers, tended to be 40, 50-year-old white men who had been in their trade for 20 years, working their way up to where they got to cover the big teams. Well, they were 20, 30 years older than the players. Conversely, SI being a national magazine, sending reporters and writers all over the country, frequently I was one of, 15 or 20 writers, most of whom were less than 45 years old, people in their 20s and 30s. So I would roll into town, Seattle or Chicago or Dallas or Detroit, and I would introduce myself to the players. And of course, that I was from Sports Illustrated meant a great deal to all of them in those days. They didn't have the same kind of press entourages, and they really weren't making the kind of money that players are making today. So it was very beneficial for them to cooperate with SI to be in the story. So that was an advantage that I found myself with that I didn't expect going in. So I was really able to get these guys to open up, to trust me, to let me visit them in their homes. In the Norm Van Leer story, Norm was already toward the end of his career. He was like 35 or 36. He was in his twilight for a Bulls team that had been terrible, but had suddenly caught fire because in the expansion draft, they picked up Artis Gilmore, who they actually traded for with the Portland Trailblazers, but they had Gilmore and Scotty May was a rookie. So they had this great end of season run in 77. And Norm, who was a playboy in Chicago, he was a man about town, a guy, had been married a couple of times and was always seen with beautiful women and driving flashy cars. He let me run with him. So I had a Saturday night run with Norm Van Leer out on the town on the night before the last regular season game of the year, which they needed to win against the Lakers, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar's Lakers. They needed to win on Sunday afternoon to make the playoffs. And so I was in Chicago to do the story. which would only run in the magazine if they won the game on Sunday. And Van Leer invited me to go out on the town with him Saturday night, the night before the 12 o'clock noon game. And so I did. And we were out all night. And is, driving around from club to club and place to place. And he dropped me off at my hotel at 3 in the morning. And I had to then go in my room and write the story. 3/4 of the story I had to write, send it in by telex on Sunday morning, then go to Chicago Stadium for the game. And if the Bulls beat the Lakers, I would have to write the top and the bottom of the story. And only in that case would the story run in the magazine. If they didn't win the game, they were going to spike the story because the Bulls were dead. And the fact that Van Leer dropped me off at 3 a.m. and then was on the court at 12 noon in front of 18,000 people to play this game was astonishing to me because I could barely keep my eyes open. And it turns out that Norm had the worst game of his life, fouled out, scored no points, fouled out, got thrown out of the game for being double teed. And a rookie who never played named Wilbur Holland came in to take his place and started making these 28-foot lefty jumpers from all over the floor. And they ended up beating the Lakers to make the playoffs. So I ended up writing the story about Norm Van Leer, although it was 1977. So I really couldn't write all about the running around town on Saturday night. Today, I probably would have to write a lot more about what actually happened than what I was able to write about then. But it was another amazing experience, and we always laughed about it after that for years and years. When Norm also had a nice post playing career and lived in Seattle, interestingly enough, right? He was a broadcaster because he finished his playing with the SuperSonics, and so yeah, Randy Smith, Slick Watts, and Norm Van Leer.
Well, John, I was going to say,
trilogy.
if you want to talk about your night with Norm Van Leer with us, we are really good at discussing and understanding. I just didn't realize libraries stayed open so late there.
Yeah, right, exactly. No, I have to protect Norm's.
Yeah.
No,
Norm's
I get it.
legacy.
What I'm going to say is, you talked about a skill, and Scott and Mark and I can attest. Getting close to these players, and we've been around them for years, is a skill that is unmatched. I know you were the same age. I know you're the guy that they understood. How did you get them to trust you so readily and so easily that you got invited out with a guy like Norm Van Leer?
Well, that's a good question, and I don't really know how to answer that. I think you just you just have to make them feel like you're not out necessarily to make them look bad or to exploit your opportunity to get to know these people, but that you're interested in what makes them great at what they do and what distinguishes them from all the other people playing their sport. And then, obviously they would read the story that you wrote. And if they didn't like what you wrote or the way you wrote it, they didn't think it really truly reflected them, they would not be very cooperative the next time you came around. So I think a lot of reporters don't really operate thinking ahead about their relationship with these players. And also in those days, these guys weren't protected by layer upon layer of press agents and schedulers and today athletes, they control so much of their image and how they come across with social media and all the direct access they have with all the social media applications and sites. it's the relationship between the press that we used to, as we used to call it, and athletes is completely different than it was in those days. I mean, Bill Walton is another example of a guy who was very sheltered and never ever talked to reporters. At UCLA as a player for John Wooden, he was completely sheltered, never had to answer questions, didn't want to talk about himself. And in the NBA, he felt that he could continue that way. And a lot of the reporters, a lot of the writers in Portland, as I said, were a lot older than he, and they didn't share the values that he had, the lifestyle that he had. He was a nonconformist. He was an unconventional character. He had his own feelings about politics that were very different from mainstream. And so he really shut everybody out. I think I was able to get him to trust me to tell the stories that would convey all these interesting facts about him and his differences from mainstream athletes. And that enabled me to have a very, very good relationship with him for his entire career, and in the 35 years after his career was over. And it was terrible and painful that he had an untimely death, I guess 2 years ago. As I might add, did all three of my point guard trilogy characters. Randy Smith died on a treadmill when he was in his 50s, and Norm Van Leer died in his 50s, and Slick, I think, also. They all died young. And it's another sort of phenomenon, I think, about athletes that people don't fully appreciate, that all the stress and strain and physical toll that their bodies endure. And of course, everybody knows football players' life expectancies are 50 years, and it's one of the difficult facts about what made these people so special and interesting and successful.
Yeah, sometimes the light burns bright, but not for a long time.
Yeah, it's very hard.
But you did a lot of profiles for the magazine and some big people. Kareem, Dr. J, Walton, as we talked about, Magic and Bird. First of all, as you were talking about your relationship with Walton, didn't you go on a trip with him to Yosemite? Because there's pictures of you and him on this trip. What was that like?
That was quite amazing. This was, remember, the Trailblazers sort of stunningly won the NBA championship in that same year we were talking about, 76, 77. First, they took out the Lakers, who were highly favored. I believe they swept them in 4 straight for the Western Championship. And then they had the 76ers with Dr. J and Darryl Dawkins and George McGinnis, and they lost the Sixers won the first 2 games in Portland. So they went back to Philly down 0-2, and then they came back and won 4 straight after sweeping the Lakers to win. And it was a great, great championship. And then the following season, the Trailblazers, young team, I think they averaged 24, 25 years, Lionel Hollins and Bobby Gross and Dave Twardzik and Walton. And they were off to a phenomenal start first half of the year. I think they were 50-10, something like that. They were on pace to set a new record. And then they hit a wall, and systematically one player after another fell with severe injuries, knees, legs, just bodies came apart. And Walton was kind of the last man standing when it came time for them to defend their championship in the playoffs. And in the Western Finals, they had none other than the Seattle SuperSonics. And I believe it was the second game. Bill Walton came down with the rebound, it hit the floor, and then he completely crumbled. His leg just buckled, his foot broke. He was taken off the court. They gave very little information about the injury. He didn't play anymore in the series. He didn't even show up and sit on the bench. He disappeared. They lost. And nobody heard a word from Bill Walton. And then in the early summer came a report that Bill Walton has declared himself a free agent, that he was medically abused by the Trailblazers medical staff, and his lawyer was declaring his contract null and void. He'd had surgery to repair this broken leg, and he would never play again for the Trailblazers. So, and on top of that, he was incommunicado. Nobody could find Bill Walton. The reporters and writers in Portland couldn't get a comment from him. So I was in New York when I read this dispatch from the AP, and I went to my editor and I said, hey, I think I might be able to find Bill. Let me go out to Portland. I know some people, I'll make some calls. And they said, yeah, go ahead. So I got on a plane, I went out to Portland. His advisor was a character by the name of Jack Scott, who was an interesting guy, an activist and former athlete and coach at Oberlin. Anyway, I knew Jack Scott. I called Jack Scott, and he gave me the secret location where I could go and meet with him and another lawyer and Bill Walton. So I did that, and I learned the entire story of the history of Bill's injury and all the x-rays that he had, and the doctor who gave him the shots, and the radiologist who detected a fracture on the x-ray, but nobody ever told the Trailblazers, and they covered it all up, and they shot him full of xylocaine in this game, and his foot exploded. So I broke that story, and that was made quite a splash, the story of the injury to Bill Walton. And he was out for an entire year to heal his leg, and then the next year he was coming back with a new contract to play for the San Diego Clippers, his hometown team, which was a terrible team. But for the occasion of the comeback, I was assigned to do a profile on Bill, and he said, if you want to do a story on me, then you have to come hiking with me in Yosemite National Park. And I said, okay, count me in. I said, does it matter that I've lived my whole life in New York City and I've never been higher than the top of the Empire State Building, with sneakers on, and I've never slept in a tent or a sleeping bag? He said, no, I'll take care of everything. So he took me to a sporting goods store and walked me through, and here's your sleeping bag, here's your tent, here are your boots, here's your this, here's your that. And then the next thing I know, he's got my credit card, and he charters an airplane to fly us from the little municipal airport in San Diego up to Mono Lake in the high Sierras. And the next thing I know, I'm walking up a darn mountain behind this 7-foot world-class superstar guy. And to my astonishment, I'm still not quite sure how I was able to do it. There was a little external help, pharmaceutical in nature, that helped me. And so that's how we did the story. We hiked through the Sierras for 5 or 6 days. We had to quit early because a bear broke into our supplies and cleaned us out in the middle of the night. And that became a big story called Climbing to the Top again, the new Bill Walton. And so that was a biggie.
Yeah.
Oh my God. There's a great picture of you and Bill in those shorts back then. And it's definitely a fashion statement from the 70s.
And the picture, so part of the deal Bill made was, you're coming with me on the hike. And I said, well, we're going to have a photographer come along to take the pictures. He said, no photographer. That's not part of the deal. That's you only. So I called the office. I said, well, they won't let me send a photographer. So they sent me a camera. They sent me a camera, like, and told me how to use it. And I actually shot that picture, that opening picture, setting my camera like on a tree trunk and with a timer. And, I got a photo credit for what they call a double truck opener for that story in Sports Illustrated, my first and only SI photo credit.
But in all those profiles you did for Sports Illustrated, all those big names we talked about, besides Walton, was there another one that really stood out to you that was something that was a personal favorite of yours?
Well, I mentioned Larry Bird, and Larry Bird was just another guy from sort of that same ilk that he didn't talk. He never talked. He wasn't comfortable talking. He never gave an interview when he was in college. He didn't really talk to the Boston writers. And, again, they told the editors said, well, go get him to talk. So I went up before the season. I think this was probably maybe that year, 78 or so. 79, I'm a little hazy. But, Larry was just amazingly candid and open and friendly. And, the opening scene, it was the first day of training camp for the rookies. So it would have been, the end of August or early September. They used to work out in Boston at a Catholic girls' school called Hellenic College, in a little gym. And so Bill Fitch, who was a kind of a cantankerous, feisty guy, was the coach. And so this was the first day of camp, and it was just the rookies. So there were 10 or 12 young guys trying to make the team out on the floor. And Larry said, I'll meet you there. I'm going to have my own workout after the rookies. So I'm sitting in the gym and the rookies are working out, and Larry then enters the gym. And when the rookies are finished and they leave the floor, Larry goes out onto the floor with a couple of basketballs, and he goes through this warm-up routine, dribbling and running and throwing passes off the wall, turning around and shooting. And I watched this whole thing, and it was like the basketball was at the end of a string that was connected to his hand in every single thing that he did with the ball. And, he would go shoot around the horn, and most of the shots, if not all of them, would go in, but he would put the right amount of spin on the ball so that it would hit the floor and then move. The ball would bounce to the next spot on the floor where he was going to go. And if the ball missed, the ball would always go where Larry was going. And I'd never seen this kind of control before, and it was like watching a ballet. And I ended up writing that whole description maybe for the first whole full page of the story, just watching this guy with this ball. And it was like watching a person with an incredibly well-trained dog. And I couldn't get over it. So, I tried to put myself in the kind of trance that I thought he was in when he was doing this work. And so that made the story into something that kind of stands out to me among all of the things I was able to see and share with readers of SI.
Yeah, John, you're talking with three guys who grew up reading your stuff. And back then, that's how we got to know who Larry Bird and Dr. J and those guys were. And they became almost mythical to us because of writers like you. Did you realize at the time how big Sports Illustrated was and that you were a part, you would never know you were in the golden age, but I mean, you were there at its apex.
Well, I knew that it was, I did know that it was the golden age. What we didn't know was that the golden age would be fairly short-lived, and that there would be a post-golden age that would basically consign virtually all of print sports journalism to recede into the dustbins of history. That said, you mentioned in your very, very generous introduction that I was certainly aware that technology was playing an enormous role in the media business, and you could see that just from what television was doing, what cable television was becoming. You could certainly, that's the same years we're talking about right now, 76, 77, 78, 79. I believe it was 79 around Labor Day when ESPN first came on the air or on cable. And 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 people made fun of a channel with supposedly, which was going to be 24 hours of sports. It was such a joke. And even SI, which had a columnist devoted to the beat of television radio, it was a column. A guy named Bill Taft was the TV radio writer, didn't write every week, but he would critique television. He lampooned and harpooned ESPN, for televising refrigerator races and Australian football and dwarf throwing and all the ridiculous things. And this will never ever work. And a few of us, I was one of them, said, hold on a minute. I think you're dismissing something that is not going to disappear, that people are going to begin to demand more and more and more. And it was the same time when we went from having the college football game of the week. There would be one game on ABC between Tennessee and Alabama, or Michigan and Ohio State, and nothing else. And all of a sudden, all those conventions were being demolished and sports was proliferating on television. And right away, some of us could tell that, well, this golden era where sports fans across America are willing to wait 3 or 4 or 5 days to get this beautifully produced and beautifully written and photographed magazine with great insight and great writing and great photography. They could see the game on Sunday and they could wait until the following Friday till the thing came in their mailbox, and then they could see those incredible pictures and read the stories that they didn't know about because these events happened in different parts of the country or the world. That you knew that this technological surge was going to make that schedule quaint and pretty soon archaic. And digital photography was the first new thing that you could shoot the game in Dallas, and for all those golden years, you'd shoot the game in Dallas. Five photographers would shoot 500 rolls of film in Dallas at 2 p.m. Then they'd take all the film in a motorcycle, ride it to the airport where they'd have a private jet chartered to fly the film to New York City, where they would then take the film from the jet at LaGuardia to Time and Life, to the photo lab, and they would process all the photos, and then they would lay them all out on the table, and they'd look at all the pictures and choose 6, and then lay them out and put them in the magazine, send all that off to the printing plant in Chicago, and then 4 days later, you guys would get the magazine at your house. That was an anachronism. All of a sudden, now you have a camera, you can take the picture, and you could then plug it into the telephone and transmit the picture. skip 12 hours and $100,000 or more, take that all out of the equation. So digital photography, then came laptop computers, then came desktop publishing, and everything got condensed. And it was easy to see that the whole business would soon shift to be electronic, and all the gathering and all the writing and all the thinking and all the cutting and all the illustrating was going to be done much less expensively, much faster. And that's why ESPN became ESPN, and SI became what it is today, which is pretty much nothing. And then I had the opportunity to help engineer this transition when I went to ESPN, first to start a magazine, but then very quickly to combine that magazine with ESPN.com and turn all that storytelling into multimedia, audio, video, exactly what we're doing right now. As a matter of fact, all is what started at that point, which was all in the early 90s, 1991, 92, 93 is when all that changed. So, long answer to your question. It was a golden age, absolutely. I miss it. We all miss it. It's very sad that we don't have that anymore. Although you do have The Athletic and other excellent ways to tell those great stories. But
just as long as they're in 280 characters or less, right?
Exactly. It's a blessing and a curse. Digital media is a blessing and a curse. It's a blessing for all the amazing things you can do with it. It's a curse because of the proliferation of stuff, and that it's very hard for anybody to distinguish something that's of quality versus something that's just being ripped off or restated from someone else's work. And in order to find an audience and stand out, you still need to do something that everybody else isn't doing, which is hopefully what you guys are doing right here, right now. So it's you can't sit here and say, oh, it was so much better back in the old days. No, not exactly. But on the other hand, there doesn't seem to be the same kind of romance and fascination attached to the whole business we're talking about today that there was then. So,
But John, you're not done yet, man. You amazing things you did. Now we got to talk about SI Kids. How did that idea come about? And did you realize you were reaching millions of kids that might not otherwise read at all?
Yeah. I did. And, when that started, I think it was 87, and the late 80s. And the idea was obviously to get sports fans interested in the brand of Sports Illustrated when they were first becoming sports fans. That is, when they were 7, 8, 9 years old. And the assumption was these would be kids the assumption was these would be boys whose fathers were sports fans, and because the father-son relationship was so much built on enjoying sports together, that would be the goal of this SI for Kids, to get boys interested in sports. But once again, when they came around to me, I was just 30 something. I said, well, it's not just boys, it's boys and girls. And because girls, there's a thing called Title IX, which is giving girls opportunities to play sports that they didn't have 20 years ago. And And when I sort of spent some time and scoped out the ideas for a magazine and went up to present them to the suits on the 34th floor at the Time and Life building, the big machas at Time Incorporated, they said, well, who are going to be your competitors for this magazine? They assumed the competitors would be other magazines like Scholastic and Boys Life. These were boys magazines that a lot of us were familiar with growing up. And I said to them, I don't think we will be competing with other magazines to get kids to read Sports Illustrated for Kids. They said, well, what are you talking about? What do you mean? I said, I think we're going to be competing with MTV and video games. And it was 1986, 87. These guys were 55, 60-year-old white guys at the top of the Time and Life building. They didn't know what I was talking about. They didn't know what MTV was. They didn't know what video games were. They didn't, they didn't have they didn't have young children or grandchildren at this point. They literally didn't know what I was doing. I said, well, kids come home from school and they have television to watch, and they have, these games, these Odysseys and ping pong and, Mario Brothers, and that's what they're going to do. So if we're going to make a magazine, it has to have the cool colors and sense of movement and interactivity, things you can do that you have in video games and television. And they thought I was nuts. They literally didn't know what I was talking about. But they let me do it. And so we did it. And, it became a tremendous success. It helped that we had the endorsement of the President of the United States, George H.W. Bush, and wife Barbara Bush, who became the ambassadors for the SI for Kids reading team. And it helped that we had a brilliant publisher who had the idea to give magazine subscriptions away for free to all the 4th, 5th, and 6th grade classes in all the school districts in the country that were below the 50% poverty line. So in all the schools that couldn't afford books or computers or television sets, they all had SI for Kids. And because we were making the content appeal to both boys and girls, the schools were happy to have them and incorporate the magazine in all of their reading curricula. So the magazine, the circulation blew to over 1 million, 2 million, 3 million, and it was a tremendous success.
I mean, I always picture Tiger Woods on the cover of the January '96 issue, and this is Tiger Woods, the amateur champion, not yet the Masters champion or anything.
Venus Williams, yeah.
And Venus Williams, talk about having these like young up and coming stars and how kids were able to relate to them.
It worked. And, it worked to the extent that, a few years later, when I found myself crossing over from SI to ESPN and starting up ESPN, the magazine, and going to Bristol, Connecticut, and sitting in meetings where I was 20 years older than all the young reporters and editors and writers that were now working for me. I said, I'm just curious, how many of you guys were readers of SI for Kids, guys and gals? How many? And every single hand went up. So everybody that went into sports media by 1992, in 2000, 100% of them were SI for Kids readers. And as I said, the entire impetus, the entire idea behind starting SI for Kids was that all these young readers, 10, 11, 12 years old, by the time they became 19 and 20, they would be Sports Illustrated magazine subscribers. Well, what actually happened was all those kids that were SI for Kids readers in 8 to 12, by the time they were 20, they were ESPN viewers and ESPN, the magazine subscribers. So, it didn't, well, I shouldn't say it didn't make me happy. It made me very happy that they were following, the readers were following me and my path and weren't sticking with SI and its path, because it's very well known that SI didn't embrace the next phase of digital media at all, got completely left behind, and that was the beginning of the end. And unfortunately, it was ESPN that helped drive the first several nails into that coffin. And I guess you could say that I was one of the people wielding the hammer. So it was sad, but it's reality.
It's pretty amazing the hand that you had, both in SI and then in ESPN, the magazine. Different, yet I think so similar in a lot of respects.
Questions fly, lightning strikes as answers try. Buzzers ring chaos in the air. Trivia time, truth or dare.
I thought I read, are you a sax player? Is that true?
That is true. I'm a born again saxophone player, meaning that I was a saxophone player in my youth and a clarinet player, and I liked it and I was good at it. And then I quit for 40 years because I had a career. Although I was once a year, I would step out and play in a garage band at the SI Christmas party called the Del Crustaceans, and I would play the saxophone and kind of make a fool of myself. So I did do that. But when I retired, I decided to take it up again.
I was going to say you and Bill Clinton, except you didn't go on Arsenio Hall and play the sax.
Yeah, it's kind of similar, yeah.
Yeah. Hey, but that helped him become president.
But that's where the similarities end.
Yes. So here's my trivia question to you. True or false? Robert De Niro and Robin Williams both had to learn the sax in order to perform in movies.
I think that's true.
That is absolutely true.
Robert De Niro played sax in the Scorsese movie with
Liza Minnelli.
New York.
Yep.
And Robin Williams played it in. He was a shrink. When did Robin Williams play saxophone?
In Moscow on the Hudson.
Moscow on the Hudson.
Where he played a Russian, someone that escaped Russia.
Well, here's a corollary to that, because in a movie with Robin Williams called The Awakening, where he played a psychiatrist, awakening patients. One of the patients in that movie was one of the greatest tenor saxophone players of all time, Dexter Gordon.
Oh, wow.
About whom I collaborated with his widow, Maxine Gordon, in writing the biography of Dexter Gordon called Sophisticated Giant, The Life and Legacy of Dexter Gordon. So he's one of my idols. His widow is one of my dearest friends. And he was in a movie with Robin Williams, who had to learn to play saxophone in Moscow on the Hudson. So there you go.
That's fantastic.
Stuff that I didn't even know.
That's a trivia question that I got you on.
There you go.
Use it. John, I just want to know, and this is just maybe a personal thought on you. We've all talked about it and you've talked about it. You're just an icon of everything you've been able to do. And you see nowadays where maybe sports media is going. Is there still room for trust-based storytelling?
Well, that's like asking, is there still room for trust-based society? We live in a world where truth is no longer a clearly detectable thing. And it's really one of the blessings and curses of this age, this media age that we're in. So I thought you were going to ask me this. Do people still want to, whether you read them or see them or hear them, do people still want good stories about sports, about athletes, about games, about events? Absolutely. Do human beings want to be informed and entertained? Absolutely, they do. So when you add the question is, does it matter to them whether their information or their entertainment is true or false? That's a much harder question, because a lot of people no longer really know the difference between what's true and what's not true. And unfortunately, we don't have any really foolproof ways of determining what's true and what's not true. It used to be that if you're, and in this country, it used to be that if your government, people that you elected, are telling you something, that they're pretty much going to be telling you the truth. I mean, I think it's always been accepted that there are secrets, have to be secrets, but we had basic trust when all of us were young, when I was young, you guys, we all learned that in school, and we trusted our teachers, and we trusted our friends, and we trusted our employers, and we trusted our leaders, we trusted our law enforcement. Today, we don't know what to trust, and you don't know whether a picture you see, or a video you see, or an audio you hear, or a podcast, or something someone writes, or something someone sends you. You don't know whether that's true or not. And I try to fight the feeling that there's really no way that all this changes. There must be some way.
I mean, John,
I don't have an answer.
we've all become, in the last 5 or 10 years, our own personal fact checkers, and I can't tell you how much time we all spend trying to find out what's the middle ground on these stories. You go from one ideological piece to another and see if there's any kind of common ground there. And I can't tell you how much time I waste every day trying to find out what truly is. The great thing about guys like you and 50 years ago, and the reason we started this show, was to highlight a time when we could trust what you guys were writing to be the truth, and to be honest, and to be a look inside to places as young kids we couldn't get to. And I asked Curry Kirkpatrick about you, and he said simply, wonderful writer who then became managing editor, easily my most favorable managing editor, and we can see why. I can speak for the both of us, where, man, we would have loved to have had a boss like you, John. 50 years ago, it was Slick Watts, and from there, what a ride. Thank you, John, for sharing so much with us today.
My pleasure, and really thanks for inviting me and making me understand that this would be time well spent, and it has been, and I really appreciate it. It was great talking to all three of you.
The great John Papanek on the Pop Podcast. Thank you, John.
Great.
Bundles of mail for a mailman. Daryl Griffith, a 6'3.5" standout at Louisville's Male High School, is widely regarded as the best all-around high school basketball player in the country, dominating games with scoring, rebounding, and shot blocking. And Billy, he had a great nickname,
Dr. Duncanstein. And for a young guy where I was when this came out, that just became my favorite player. You didn't get to see many highlights, but when you did, he was always dunking. Love that nickname, Dr. Duncanstein.
Went on to play at Louisville. I don't know. Was he on that Louisville team that beat UCLA, Mark?
Oh, please torture me, why don't you? Yes,
Mark was there.
We already talked about how you dominate Cal Poly San Luis Obispo.
Yeah.
All right.
No.
Now you can give it up that Couisville got the better of you, and you can tell us all again how Kiki Vandeweghe missed an easy shot.
That would have given him a 5-point lead.
Couldn't handle pressure.
Yeah, Louisville won that game 59-54, and Daryl Griffin scored 23 points in that game.
Oh wow, almost half
And,
their points. Yeah, he was
and
a
then he,
great player. Great
Yep.
player. Went on to have a very good career in Utah. I think
Yep.
another one of those guys that might have gotten hurt at some point and was
Yes.
never quite the same player
He missed a
because
season because of an injury.
yeah.
Well, what was interesting is I think the Kentucky Colonels offered him a contract in the ABA where he wouldn't have to play college. He could just skip college, but he decided to go college, guys. And there was no nil back then either.
No, he was before Stockton and Malone. The
Yeah.
Utah Jazz, not New Orleans with Maravich, but he was like the face of that franchise for quite a while.
Yeah. I just think I was looking at context here. Back in 84, 85, Griffith broke the NBA three-point record with 92 threes. And then you go to Steph Curry, was it? He had 402 20 some years later, 30 years later.
It's a totally different game.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
TV radio, ABC's Olympic broadcast began shakily, weighed down by self-indulgence, uneven commentary, and questionable production choices, but improved dramatically as the games unfolded. We talked about some of the stars of the games, Billy, but really a star was born behind the mic in these games.
Yeah, Dick Button may have been one of the original, at least people that we knew, an athlete that spoke their mind. He was known for honesty and not hype. You get to be that way because you're a two-time Olympic gold medalist, as he was. But when he came to judging skaters, he rarely, if ever, used the word great. They were always just really good.
Yeah, I mean, that he was not prone to hyperbole. He would
No.
not do well in these in today's world, right? Where everyone is the most amazing thing. That's what makes that Franz Klammer run what it is, because it is amazing, because it's still amazing, but yeah, Button, I don't know how many games he ended up doing, but he became a fixture when it came to the Winter Olympics. And
Do you know when he won his Olympic medals, his gold medals?
man,
55.
1948 and 1952, and then he was the world champion 5 years in a row from 48.
So I'm saying, in a lot of ways, you know how good you are. It's got to be tough to look at someone else because you're judging them from a different prism than we would be doing it. So yeah, they're good. Yeah, because he's thinking they're not great like me.
or he's just very critical. He's like, I know what they're supposed to do in that.
Yeah, there you go.
And
There
they
you go.
missed it.
Yeah.
He's also the only, I think, non-European man to have been named European champion, and I think he's the first one to land the double axel jump in a competition.
That Foley jump.
Yeah, so it's like, but people remember him for his color work, on TV. But man, was he a skater?
Did you look up? I've never seen him skate. Did you look at his Olympic things?
No, I didn't look at.
Oh, okay. I remember.
I was there. I watched it in person.
I know you were.
Much
I know
like,
you were. Marcus Wright producing for him.
Chris Farley in the pairs skating, he was something to see.
This is interesting. In 1978, he suffered serious head injuries when several men assaulted him in Central Park. It was a bunch of youth with baseball bats.
Yeah.
3 of them were convicted of assault. Isn't that crazy?
Yeah.
They don't use the word youths anymore. That's pretty much gone.
They're saying it was random, but who knows?
Isn't that a rapper?
Yes, random. I'm sure it is.
Let's
He was
talk
95 when he died. That's pretty impressive.
Let's talk a little golf, Billy. And
I'll
by
make-
a little, I mean a little. Mike Morley. What about this dude that's got your attention?
He won one PGA event, 1977, but he quit drinking and smoking. He replaced his cigarette cravings with running. And here's his quote. At the end of the week, I didn't want to smoke anymore or run.
I don't blame him. Do you know what his best finish was in the majors? In any of the majors?
7th or 15th?
8th. He finished tied
Eighth.
for 8th in the U.S. Open in 1980.
There you go.
Yeah, that's when he started smoking again.
That's right.
It's like it's the airplane line.
Okay.
I picked a wrong time to stop sniffing glue.
Exactly right.
That gets us to our cover story, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Clark. Bobby Clark embodied relentless effort, leading through action rather than words. Tough for him to talk without any teeth, I guess. which there he was on the cover of Sports Illustrated, missing a lot of those front teeth, as a lot of hockey players did. Not, I don't think it's as much now because of the shields and stuff, but hockey players always were toothless back in the day, weren't they?
Yeah, go look at Drew Doughty nowadays. Say he's got the Bobby Clark thing.
Oh, has he got that?
Oh yeah, yeah. There's nothing there.
Well, imagine
Um,
being a goalie with no mask and these pucks are coming at you how many miles an hour?
That is
It's
still
crazy.
really, really incredibly dumb. But
yeah.
thank God for Jacques Plante.
Clark was undersized and diabetic, but had a lot of heart and was the kind of the heart and soul of that Flyers' great run. They win the cup in 74-5. They win it, no, in 74 and in 75, and they're looking like they're going to make a run here at a three-peat, but didn't happen, right, Billy?
No, it didn't. Bernie Parent got injured, and I believe they probably would have won if he didn't have the back injury that kept him out most of the season. But the season before, this is Bobby Clark's leadership. He promised Parent a Jeep if they won the cup. Parent won MVP. They won the cup. Bobby Clark had a Jeep delivered the next day. That's what Bobby Clark was. Just a leader and a great player at the same time. Even though there were people that said he had no obvious superstar gifts, well, he sure seemed to know, how to put the puck in the net, how to lead guys to titles.
He had a down year in the early 70s, like 71, 72, because of a tooth abscess, which I found amusing because he didn't have a lot of teeth. And the ones he did have were having problems.
The one.
Yes.
The one that he had took all the abuse.
Yeah, they said, Billy, you're right, though. They said that, he didn't do anything particularly
Yeah.
great.
Yep.
He just did everything very well.
Yep. But we know that, Bobby Clark obviously had, I think 3 or 4 years of over 100 points, but he knew how to lead men. He knew how to reach every player on the team, because winning a Stanley Cup, like any title, takes somebody that helps push you over the top, not just on the ice or on the field, but emotionally as well.
Yeah, and look, the Flyers have not won a cup since.
And the thing is, Bobby Clark, when he coached the team, actually took them to the cup one year, I do believe. So he was a pretty good coach too. He took Minnesota and got them to the conference finals. Bobby Clark knew how to coach. He didn't last long in it, but he did know how to coach.
Rookie cards of baseball, basketball, and football stars are iconic pieces of American history, and they have been outstanding investments over the last 50 years. Now, key issues of Sports Illustrated, professionally graded and encapsulated by CGC, have emerged as an exciting alternative to trading cards. ThePit.com is the leading online exchange for investment-grade sports magazines. General Manager Mark Humphreys offers Sports Illustrated first cover editions featuring stars like Kobe Bryant, LeBron James, Michael Jordan, Tom Brady, Patrick Mahomes, Derek Jeter, Ken Griffey Jr., and so many more. February 23rd, 1976, the captain of the Philadelphia Flyers, Bobby Clark, is on the cover of SI. Mark, tell me a bit about this issue.
Well, I love this issue, and the main reason I love it is in my opinion, the second most iconic toothless portrait of an athlete. And Scott, do you know who who would have the number one position in that ranking?
I'm just guessing Leon Spinks.
You're correct. Leon Spinks.
That shows you how iconic is, because I have not thought of that in a long, long time. But he was.
Yeah, that is one that lasts in the memory. And the Leon Spinks issue was February 27th, 1978. So almost 2 years, almost exactly 2 years. 2 years and 4 days later, they put Leon Spinks on the cover after he had beat Muhammad Ali in in what I believe was a significant upset. Leon was 24, Ali was 36, however. But Bobby Clark in 1976 was featured on Sports Illustrated cover for the second time. And he was the fiery leader of the Flyers. And he's shown missing a couple teeth, and I think Sports Illustrated knew this was appealing. Obviously, they used it again 2 years later. But Clark deserved to be there. I'm not a hockey expert, but I did some research on Clark, and he was the best player in hockey at that time and the leader of the best team. The Flyers had won the cup in 74 and 75. In 76, they would not win the cup, but they would be in the finals and they would get swept by the Canadiens. And Clark was a 3-time Hart Trophy winner, the most valuable player of the NHL. Bobby Clark is ranked the number 24 player all time. This by the Hockey News some time ago, so he's probably maybe drifted down in the rankings a bit. This is from a 1998 ranking. But he was certainly one of the greatest players of that era. He became the general manager of the Flyers for almost 20 years after his playing days. And it's a very collectible cover. I don't have that cover, but I have his first cover on Sports Illustrated from 1974. Mayhem on the Ice, Philadelphia Wars with New York, May 6th, 1974. And you can see, even in this picture, they made sure they showed that Bobby was missing some teeth. Because I think it was always a crowd pleaser for the magazine audience. So Clark was a great player. He was on the cover of 2 Sports Illustrateds during this era of Philadelphia dominance. And they are both aesthetically pleasing because it shows a warrior with the with some of the results of his war, and he was a truly great player.
Tell me, what would the 75 and, if you know, the 74, what are those issues going for these days?
Sure. The issue I just showed you from 1974 during their during the Stanley Cup, successful Stanley Cup run was purchased by me almost a year ago for $120. And that's another one that I consider a great bargain because it's the finest that's yet been graded. It's graded 9.0. But from these issues from the 1970s, it's very rare to find one at the highest grades, 9.8 or 9.6. It's possible that none will ever be graded at that pristine level. And 9.0 still represents an issue that, if it was read at all, it was read very carefully. So I would expect this issue to appreciate greatly, significantly in the future. But again, for casual collectors, this is the kind of issue that's easily obtainable on eBay in subscription form for $10.
There you go. Bobby Clark and Leon Spinks. Never the two shall be misidentified again. Thanks, Mark.
Thanks, Scott.
Only thepit.com offers competitive buy now and sell now quotes on graded magazines online, as well as many of the most popular modern PSA graded rookie cards, including Shohei Ohtani, Lamar Jackson, Joe Burrow, Nikola Jokic, and Steph Curry. Trade sports stars like stocks at thepit.com.
Whistles blow, legends grow. For the record, record. Wow, whistles blow, legends grow. For the record, record.
Mark, a couple of guys got some new jobs.
They sure did, and they should be familiar sounding names to college football fans. Both are 39, but when I think of them, I don't think of them both being the same age. Dick Vermeil, the UCLA coach, is now named the head coach of the Philadelphia Eagles, and Lou Holtz, also 39, he always looked older, is named head coach of the New York Jets. Now, Vermeil had a much better NFL coaching career than Holtz did, but Holtz went back to college and did just fine for himself. But he was a special teams coach, I guess, under Marv Levy at one time for Vermeil, which I didn't realize, which is how he got his break. But yeah, he left UCLA on a high after they win the Rose Bowl, and he goes to the Eagles, and he ended up winning a Super Bowl. Wasn't he coach of the Rams when they won the Super Bowl?
Yeah, he was. He was.
Right. And he was the Chiefs head coach too, so it had a nice long career with the Eagles, Rams, and Chiefs.
Yeah, right. He's the coach of the Rams with Kurt Warner when they come from out of nowhere and have that great year, and then he retires, right?
Yeah, and then what was it? Mike Martz took over.
Yeah, Mike Martz took over
to the Patriots.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Not too many people leave a team like that, but he was burnt out. That's these people don't realize that head coaches work about 100 hours a week.
Yep.
Yeah.
You know, Bill Belichick was known for like getting to the stadium at like 4 a.m. and leaving at like 10 at night. I mean, just you can see.
And still working when you get home.
Yeah,
It's not like you go home and put on Seinfeld. You're
never
still.
ending. After playing just 35 games as a rookie in Portland, Bill Walton has fractured his left leg in his second season as a Trailblazer. He would miss about a month. Played in 51 games total, 16 points and 13 rebounds a game for Bill. But staying on the court would be a problem his entire NBA career, and it was always foot and leg problems. When he played, he was great, but he just couldn't stay on the court very long. Billy, Bjorn Borg, about to become a household name.
Oh boy, Bjorn Borg! It was a small, teeny little clip. It said Bjorn Borg beats Guillermo Vilas in straight sets to win the WCT event in Toronto. Now, mind you, he had already won 2 French Opens. Well, let's see. Rest of 1976, he won 7 tournaments, including the Wimbledon. He won 12 tournaments in 1977, 9 in 78, 12 in 1979, 9 more in 1980, including 7 more majors. Yeah, I think Bjorn Borg's ready to hit the big time.
Yeah, one of the truly.
He's coming up on one of our magazines, I think, in May.
Yeah, Mark, make sure you get him, okay?
Okay,
Yes.
I'm right there.
I'm just saying.
Flying to Sweden right now.
But I'm saying right now, if you just look at the articles, Bjorn Borg's getting just a little play.
Yeah.
Like, oh yeah, he did this. You don't realize that he's going to explode over the next 4 or 5 years.
Before the fame, there was the flame.
Faces in the crowd. Rebecca Jobert, Billy.
Yes, she's 20 years old. She took the 132-pound class at the Chattanooga Open powerlifting meet with a bench press of 135 pounds, a squat lift of 225, and a deadlift of 300. She also became the first female to win a Tennessee weightlifting event against male competition. So now go up a little bit. On her LinkedIn page, she says, I competed in powerlifting for 5 years and with God's help accomplished many powerlifting awards, including 12 former world records. Here's where it gets interesting. I was given the opportunity to live in California for a short time and worked for Joe Gold at one of his new gyms, where I also met Arnold, Frank Zane, and Franco Colombo.
Yeah.
She got around.
Gold's Gym.
Joe Gold.
Gold's Gym.
That's right.
I worked at a Gold's Gym for decades.
Pretty impressive. I mean, some of these little articles, yeah, you see it, but you look into their life and you realize how amazing of a career in weightlifting that this young gal had, or at least 20 years old at the time.
Yeah. Mark, you got one?
I do. It's Gap Bova, 44 of Honolulu.
Gapper.
He won his 3rd Open Singles Cribbage Championship. Okay.
Woo!
And it's not, I have no idea about Gab or Gap. It's Gap. Like a generation gap. I have nothing about, I just am fascinated by cribbage, as a sport. Wasn't that like the one in Harry Potter where they're flying?
But
That's Quidditch.
That's okay.
That's Quidditch. Yeah, Quidditch.
Never mind.
But isn't cribbage sound like, don't you have to be 90?
I think, but you play it with like pegs. There's like pegs and stuff like that. But you know what cribbage is really popular with? Baseball players. I can remember going
to
dugouts. So when they had downtime, a lot of these players were playing cribbage, which I found very interesting.
One of my best friends growing up, he and his dad played cribbage all the time, and I would watch, and I was like, I have no idea what you guys are doing.
It's like they're making up the game,
I think I hate everybody that plays cribbage now.
Okay, all right.
And they hate you too.
Yes, because I don't play.
Yeah, and I mock those who do.
Yes.
Them and bridge.
Yes, God, yeah. The king queen, yeah, it's coming at you. Tenfold king, bring it on.
All right, now my favorite part of the show. They call it the 19 poll. I call it pissed off readers. Billy.
Okay, let me get mad here. Come on. This is from Doug Hill, Steve Janovitz, and Charles Boulin. They're from Auburn, Alabama. They said, we attended the Auburn-Tennessee game in Knoxville on January 19th. We listened to the Alabama-Tennessee game in Knoxville on January 31st. We read the Bernie Ernie article in SI the following week, and we reached a few conclusions. 1, Bernard King is Bush. 2, Ernie Grunfeld is Bush. 3, Ray Mears is Bush. 4, Tennessee fans are Bush. There you go.
Well, that took 3 guys to write.
It did. Well, they each had to take one of them, pick a player or a coach, and then do it.
I think one guy would write a sentence and he would just get so mad he'd just take off and then go, all right, Doug's done. Mark, you pick it up from here.
I've got Marcy Clark from Knoxville, Tennessee. Although King and Grunfeld are great ball players who are proud of the job they've done, I feel that it weren't for the other players on the team, Mike Jackson, John Darden, Doug Ashworth, and fine slubs like Austin Clark and Terry Crosby, not to mention the fine coaches and full house crowds, Bernie and Ernie wouldn't be on top. Yes. So, you know what? Stop giving them all the credit.
Yeah. I've just about had enough of this.
I mean, I think, too much of the credit goes to Jordan and Pippen when it was obvious that it was Paxson and Cliff Livingston and John.
Steve Kerr.
All those guys. They were the real reason the Bulls were winning.
Yeah.
Enough of this.
You take Jordan and Pippen off that team, they win the same titles. Come on. Come on.
And also with a player like Jordan, he can get off with pushing off a player and not getting called for.
Oh, yeah, he was a big cheater. He wasn't good at all.
Yeah.
Let's end on a happy note, shall we? T. Davis from the Bronx writes, my compliments to John Papanek for his excellent articles strutting their stuff in the February 9th issue. Talent is not the ABA's problem. Lack of exposure is. For those of us who are aware of the first annual slam dunk contest but unable to fly to Denver for the evening to see it, your article was a godsend. I hope one of the television networks will obtain the rights to this colossal event. There definitely is spectator interest, and boy, was he right. Yep. I mean, the dunk contest is not what it used to be, but it sure was back then, and 50 years later, we're still talking about that Dr. J dunk.
Well, yeah, if you watch that video, that's that free throw line. That's absolutely amazing. Just the skill and the athleticism that he showed.
Yep. John Papanek writing about the ABA's historic dunk contest won by Dr. J. Julius Erving. Want to thank the aforementioned John Papanek for joining us today. From Slick Watch and the Sonics to the evolution of Sports Illustrated and ESPN, the magazine, and .com. What a career and what a conversation. So our thanks again to the great John Papanek for sharing the stories behind the stories. That's what we do here on Past Our Prime. Thanks for listening. We're done with February, on the march. See you, boys.